My name is Chinyelu Udoh. I am a candidate for civil court judge right here in Kings County, Brooklyn, New York, for the 6th Municipal District. So for many people who don't know what that district covers, it is Crown Heights, it is Flatbush, it is East Flatbush, it is Prospect Lefferts Gardens, it is Lefferts Gardens, it's a little bit of Midwood, a little bit of Borough Park, Kensington, Windsor Terrace. So if any of you live in any of those communities, you will see me on the ballot on June 25th. I went to Northwestern University undergraduate, which is where I got my bachelor's degree in economics and social policy. And then I had the pleasure of going on to Pace University School of Law to attend law school. And from that, I had the wonderful opportunity to work as a criminal defense attorney. It was one of the most exciting and wonderful positions to ever have. I really had the opportunity to work in our communities and do the right thing when it comes to protecting some of our most vulnerable. And what I loved about it is that I got to truly understand what it means to be a defense attorney, to defend people's rights to the law. You know, and that's not an easy thing to do when people are claiming that someone is charged with a crime. But as far as I was concerned, I set that aside. I looked at the person that I represented as a human being, someone who was entitled to the same rights that I'm entitled to, that anyone in this city, anyone in the state of New York is entitled to. And when you look at a person like that and you know that you can represent someone and protect someone's rights to freedom and liberty in this country, in this city, and in this state, it's a good feeling to know that you did the right thing regardless of what happens on any other level. The civil court is really called the People's Court. And the reason why they call it the People's Court is because 99% of the time, if you actually have a case in the court, in civil court, and you do not have an attorney to represent you, that is not a bad thing. You can actually go into the court, represent yourself, and there are avenues for you to be able to do that. And that's why it's the People's Court. So civil court judges have a huge responsibility because they're going to be dealing literally with the people from the community who have to represent themselves on claims up to a maximum of $25,000. There are lots of different types of actions that happen in the civil court. For example, a slip and fall case. For example, a small contract case where work was supposed to be performed under a contract and then wasn't performed. But also within the civil court, there actually is a smaller division in there called small claims court. And small claims court, I think many people are aware of it because I know that there are a lot of television shows out there. And so anything with respect to small claims court is usually a case up to a maximum of $5,000. So the first thing is you have to be a lawyer. So lawyers who have been practicing for, at a minimum here in New York, for about 10 years, and then you can become eligible to run for elected office to be a civil court judge. But I personally think that it should be more than simply just having practiced as an attorney for 10 years. I believe that someone who is running for civil court should be someone who is dedicated to the community. What a lot of people don't know, but what I want everyone to understand is that civil court judges are public servants. They are responsible for dedicating their lives in service to the public. And so what does that mean? What that means is that you would hope that someone has been out in the community, someone has been dedicated to the community, someone has been active in the community before they've taken on the journey of getting to the bench. And I definitely have been the type of person that has been involved in my community from day one. From being a part of the community boards, from being on my block association actively, from being involved in numerous community-based organizations. I have just always been someone that's been out there dedicated to uplifting our people, uplifting our community members, uplifting our young people, uplifting young men, young women, our seniors, because that's what it's all about. If we can't serve the public just in the community community, then what good would we be doing if we are on the bench? So I tend to believe that anyone who's interested in becoming a civil court judge should have proof of a history of having worked and being dedicated to their community for a long, long, long time. Many times there hasn't been a large discussion about the election of judges, but I want to be a part of the change that makes it important for people in our communities to have discussions about judges. Why is it important? Because you have to understand, when you elect somebody to civil court, you are electing them for a period of 10 years. That is the longest serving public official here in the city of New York. Someone who is running for city council is 4 years. Someone who is running for state senate or state assembly is a 2-year term. And so if you are not happy with the role that they are playing as your elected official, you have the opportunity to vote them out after 2 years or after 4 years. That's not the case when it comes to a judge. When you elect a judge, you are electing them to sit on the bench and make decisions about what happens to us in our communities, in criminal court, in family court, in civil court, for a minimum of 10 years. And so that's why I think it's important to start having these conversations about the election of judges. The practice in the history has been a judge usually ends up having a term of anywhere from obviously a minimum of 10 years, but I have seen many of the judges here in New York City sit on the bench for up to 30 years. And that is over 1.5 generations of making decisions. So the election of judges, again, it's extremely important, and we have to start having those conversations. It's not simply about going into the voting booth and voting down the ballot as a Democrat. You actually have to know who you are voting for, because I can't tell you time and time again, simply because someone is a Democrat doesn't necessarily mean that they are someone that is advocating for you in your community. So it's better to know and to learn who the candidates are and to do your research about what they bring to the table if they want to be that public servant for a minimum of 10 years. You can always learn about judicial candidates through their social media pages. For example, I have a website, I have a social media campaign Facebook page, I also happen to be on Instagram, and I happen to be on Twitter. So if anyone is interested in getting to know what I'm doing, wanting to follow my journey, all you have to do is look up my name, Chinyelu Udoh, on Facebook, my website, Udoh for Judge, Twitter or Instagram, all under my name, Chinyelu Udoh. Not only have I been in the community dedicated to uplifting our people, but at the same time, I currently work in the court system. So I have the pleasure of actually currently working for a judge. And the benefit of that is that I actually know what happens in the courts. I actually understand what is going on in our courts. So I have the benefit of knowing what is happening in our communities and knowing what is happening in our courts, and being able to have that level of understanding. I believe I can bring a level of compassion and wisdom when making decisions about the rule of law, when we have to decide what happens to cases in court. That's what's important. When it comes to having an understanding of the various cultures and communities within any city, I would hope that a judge on the bench actually takes all of that into consideration. Not to say that that is rule of law, not to say that that is law, but there is something to be said when a judge is out there handing out punishment, handing out decisions, making judgments on a case, that they're making it not only with an understanding of the rule of law, but also understanding what has happened in that particular case. I don't believe that every case should be handled in the same fashion. I really think that it's extremely important that when a judge is sitting on the bench, that they are taking into consideration everything that is going on within that particular case. And, to focus on any outside influences or to focus on the personal influences of the judge, I don't think that that is a fair way to decide. I really believe that what needs to be done is making decisions solely about the case and the case itself and the people and the individuals that are involved in that case. I think that it's extremely important that when you go into a voting booth, that it's not simply about just voting down the ballot line for Democrat or any other party. You're right. There are so many discussions about a city council election, about a state senate election, about a state assembly election, but very rarely do you have a discussion about judges and judicial candidates. Now, why has that been? I think it's because our community hasn't made it an important impact. And I think it's time for us to start changing that narrative, changing that dialogue, and start making it a priority for our communities. I think because of what has been going on over the past couple of years, just on a national level, with the current administration on the federal level, in addition to the fact that I believe so many people watched last year what was going on with the lifetime appointment of the U.S. Supreme Court Justice, and I think people became shocked. I think people didn't realize how serious and how important it was to focus on the election of judges. For some reason, it was never an important factor to people, but now it has become an important factor. I, though, have always believed that it's been an important factor, and I'm actually really happy to know that the conversation is gaining and is growing and is becoming to an extent that everyone is starting to have these conversations. Should it have happened 10 years ago? Yes. Should it have happened 20 years ago? Yes. But you know what? We cannot dwell on the past. We have to focus on the future. We have to focus on the present. We have to know that now that there is a discussion about judges and judicial candidates, that the people in our community start to get involved and have those discussions. And it shouldn't be about just going into a voting booth and voting down the ballot. It really should be about you, the people in the community, getting to know who the actual candidates are, because not every single candidate is going to be for you. And that's the research that you have to do. It's no different than when you have options when you're choosing who best to vote for when it comes to a state assembly person, or who best to vote for when it comes to state senate, or who best to vote for when it comes to city council. Now we're adding into the mix the discussion about who best to vote for when it comes to judges. And I'm very happy that we're having that discussion. I definitely agree that as human beings, we all come with our own biases. But I want the people to understand that when it comes to a judge and a judge on the bench, the expectation is that that judge is setting aside their own personal biases. And in fact, they are simply looking at the facts of a case, looking at the circumstances of the case, making a decision about the rule of law to that particular case. There should be nothing about a person's bias that comes into play in this instance. But that's important. I don't think people understand that and realize that, and maybe sometimes it does happen, but I want our people to know that it shouldn't happen. And in order to make sure that it shouldn't happen, it's the responsibility of the community to understand who they're voting for. If you don't want the candidate to have any biases, then you need to do your research and figure out who that person was before they became a judicial candidate, because that will tell you a lot about the individual then and there. And once you've learned the history of that person, then you'd be more comfortable with making a decision about who this person is when you go into the voting booth. We are not allowed to debate, and one of the reasons why is because we are not in a position to go out into the community and make any promises to anyone. That is not the role of a judge. For example, a city council candidate is going to come before you and talk about certain policies and how they are promising to change this in a person's circumstances or changing this aspect in the economy. Judges are not allowed to do that. The sole obligation, the sole responsibility of a judge is to sit on the bench and decide cases based upon the rule of law. For example, if a judge is sitting in criminal court, you can't talk about, I'm going to protect people and help them get jobs. You actually have to sit in criminal court and deal with the rules and the laws of crimes in criminal court, and it's called the penal code, and that's how you make decisions. But at the same time, you would want a judge who has an understanding of what's going on in your community, a judge who has an understanding of having been out into the community, a judge who has been a public servant before getting to the bench, because all of those factors are played into when that judge sits on the bench and makes a decision ultimately about what happens in a case. And that's what really is important when it comes to judges. Yes, we can't make any promises to you, but we can make decisions with compassion, and that is key. One of the things I personally valued about my time as a criminal defense attorney was that I really took it upon myself to really understand my clients. It's not just about representing a client in court. You have to understand what's going on in that person's life. You have to understand what brought that person to the circumstances that caused them to now have a case in criminal court. And sometimes those stories aren't easy. Sometimes those stories are downright frustrating and extremely sad. But at the end of the day, they still deserve to be represented. They still deserve to have their rights protected, and they still deserve, at the very least, to be treated like a human being. I want to be treated like a human being. My client wants to be treated like a human being. And I think everyone in society wants to be treated like a human being. And when you work on that premise and you work hard for anyone in the role that you have, you're doing the right thing, then nothing else should matter. I want to start off by saying the first and most important thing. I don't know anyone in society that is perfect. We have all made mistakes, okay? Some of the mistakes that people have made are probably pretty bad, but then some of the mistakes that people have made are probably not so bad that should render them having to sit in jail for any extenuated period of time. But that is not the decision for me to make. That's the beauty of the courts. That's the beauty of the court system. When I was operating as a criminal defense attorney, it was my responsibility to make sure that all the rights were still afforded to someone because they are entitled to it, whether they made a mistake or not. So this has nothing to do with being soft on crime. This has everything to do with, it doesn't matter what mistake you made, you are still afforded and should be guaranteed your rights. And ultimately, when the decision is made about what happens to you on any particular case, then hopefully you accept that decision. But regardless of that, I still believe that every human being is entitled to be treated as a human being, regardless of whatever charge was placed upon them, regardless of whatever crime they are charged with. It doesn't matter. You are a human being and you should be treated as such. And even those who have been charged with crimes have rights. And because you have rights, those rights must be protected. So this doesn't have anything to do with being soft on crime. This has everything to do with following a process. There is a process that happens. There are laws in the books. There are laws in place. That's why there are courts. That's why there are judges. That's why there are lawyers. You have prosecutors and you have defense attorneys. And everybody has a role to play in that particular process. And it's because of that that we should feel safe and comfortable that this is going to be handled in the way that it needs to be handled. And so whatever outcome that happens is an outcome that took place because everyone did the right thing when it came to their role. And so it has nothing to do with being soft on crime, but everything to do with doing the right thing, following the rules, following the process, and accepting what that outcome is. Elections are June 25th. Why are they June 25th? Because that's the new date of primaries. There were new voting laws that had been changed in our Democratic Assembly and Senate. And so in the past, primaries were in September. But now, starting 2019, primaries are going to be in June. And very specifically this year, primaries are going to be June 25th of 2019. So I really want everyone to come out and vote. But more importantly, I want people to come out and vote for me. Of course, why wouldn't I ask for people to support me? You know, I have done the work. I have been in the community. I have dedicated my life to being a public servant already. And this is just an added aspect of the journey to continue to serve the public in the capacity as a judge. I want to say what's up to everybody. You know why? Because everybody's important. I want to say what's up to my family, what's up to my friends, but what's up to Brooklyn, okay? Because Brooklyn is where I'm running, and more specifically, I want to say what's up to Flatbush, East Flatbush, Crown Heights, Ditmas Park. You know, that's where the people are going to see my name on the ballot. So I am saying what's up to you, but more than what's up New York, Brooklyn, vote for me, Chinyelu Udoh.